So I'm Catherine, and I'm also at the Auckland University of Technology that Pedro also works at. And I'm talking today about enjoying ourselves at work and supporting students well at the same time. Uh, Rachel Morrison, who's my co-researcher, she's not with us this evening. Um, so you've just got me. But it's great to be able to talk about a topic that's very close to my heart. Uh, I'm There's lots of published research that looks into the connections between motivation and engagement and worker productivity. And so I guess that's my rationale for talking today about the connection between worker enjoyment and helping our students. And I think personally it's something that I'm very interested in, and I guess I'm intuitively know in my own life to be the case. I don't have evidence necessarily that learning advisors enjoying their work leads to better support of students, but that's something I guess interested to hear from you about too. And I've so the rationale for this talk is that other research supports the fact that it helps in other industries. So that's why I'm here today talking. So what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to cover three aspects, and I'm sort of envisaging three opportunities for people to feed in and have a discussion for those who are here with me. But also, if you don't understand anything I say, have any questions, please feel free to chat about those and ask questions. So I'm going to talk about a couple of studies that Rachel and I have done. The first one is looking at learning advisors in New Zealand and what the kinds of things that make them enjoy their work and feel dissatisfied. And we did a textual analysis, and I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about what we found, and I'm going to see if it resonates with you in your situation, and whether you think enjoying your work or not enjoying your work impacts on your ability to help students. I'm then going to talk briefly about a second study that we did, which was an online study, and it was a much larger study. And we found a gender difference between one of the components that helps people enjoy their work. And I'm just going to share that and then see if it resonates with you again. And then finally, I'm just going to, from the original first study, share some strategies that came out of the research for ways in which managers might, who are managing learning advisors, strategies they might be able to use to help them perhaps better promote workplace enjoyment, and also strategies that individual learning advisors might use themselves. And again, I'm really interested to hear any strategies that you have, and we could share those amongst us so that we can perhaps all learn from them and have a better day at work tomorrow. Not that it wasn't good today, but it can always get better. Okay, so on to the first study, where we looked at research into learning advisors in New Zealand and what makes them enjoy their work or not enjoy their work. So we just used a fairly well-known and well-established theory here, Hertzberg's two-factor theory, to kind of as a foundation for our research, because it's been pretty well tested since it first was published in the 60s. So a lot of research since has confirmed that it's broadly applicable to different workplaces. So some of you may be very familiar with this theory, and others it might be quite new to you. But I'm just going to briefly discuss the theory, And if you have any questions, please let me know. But I also must admit, Rachel is more of the expert on this than I am, because she's actually from the business school here at AUT. Um, so hopefully you won't ask me anything too difficult, but if you do, I'll see how I get on with that. Okay, so basically, Hertzberg's theory looks at what creates job dissatisfaction and what creates job satisfaction. And the two things are quite separate. So job satisfaction, if you look on the left, is influenced by what he called hygiene factors. So basically, basic idea is that there are certain things that we just all kind of expect to happen in a workplace. There's sort of basic conditions. So we all pretty much expect reasonable working conditions. We expect to get on pretty well with our co-workers. We expect to have sensible policies and rules in place that are fair and reasonable. We expect a reasonably good supervisor or management quality, and a base wage or salary that is enough for us to survive and where we live, and do a little bit better than survival, but to live the way that we need to live. Okay, so we basically expect these things, and so they don't, when we have them, they don't lead to satisfaction, but when we don't have them, they lead to job dissatisfaction. We become quite dissatisfied when we don't have these things. On the other hand, things that lead to job satisfaction or motivation are things that we have in addition to hygiene factors. And these are the kind of sort of icing on the top stuff, such as a sense of achievement, sense of recognition of our work, from colleagues, clients, students, that sort of thing. A positive sense of responsibility. The work itself we like. So that means the work of a learning advisor, we like it, for example. Or if we're an accountant, we like doing things with figures. We have an opportunity for advancement in our particular chosen field, and there's an opportunity for personal growth. So if we have these things, we tend to become really satisfied and motivated in our work. So if an employer wants us to be satisfied and motivated, they need to deal with any dissatisfaction first, or hygiene factors, and then build these other things in, and we'll be really happy. Okay, so I'll move on to I think this is quite a good chart that shows us, I hope you can see that okay, shows that was Hertzberg's original research, I believe. And as I say, if anyone's got any questions, please ask. So there was a big sample, and you can see on the left, the orange is the hygiene factors. Or so for the majority of the people in the survey, the factors on the left they were hygiene factors. So if they were absent, people became dissatisfied. So that's things like company policy, supervision, work conditions, relationship with peers, management, and so forth. Status, security. Whereas on the right, on the top right, the factors for the majority of people that motivated them and gave them job satisfaction were the things I mentioned before: achievement, recognition, the work we do, responsibility, advancement, and growth. So I quite like that visually. So you can see that it's not the same for everyone, but there are certainly trends which are more common, showing more common factors. So the research that we did, so we wanted to see what factors learning advisors, what factors just made them dissatisfied in their jobs, and what factors made them satisfied and motivated. Because the premise is, that's a great thing because it means we'll end up doing a good job too. If we find out what learning advisors like, they can do a better job. So what we did is we did a textual analysis of 3 ATLAANZ conference proceedings. And ATLAANZ is I guess you guys know, but the Association of Learning Advisors for Australia and New Zealand. We found 20 papers made some mention of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. So we did a textual analysis of sentiment or feelings and in the papers. And pretty much, I think only one of them actually directly was on this sort of topic. So we had to detect sentiment in different ways than actually it being stated, that I like my job because of this, or I dislike my job because of this. And just out of interest, these were the 3 most common ways that people mention feelings or sentiment. Generally, it wasn't directly mentioned, but they used words that might infer sentiment. So, for example, if the word collaboration was used, it generally was used in the context, well, it was always used in the context, actually, that inferred a positive experience. Whereas if the word neoliberalism was used, which was used quite a bit, it was generally referred to in a context that inferred something frustrating or worrying or perhaps negative. People did also mention direct sentiment. So somebody mentioned, for example, having an enjoyably stimulating interaction with peers. So we know from those words that they were having a good time. And finally, sometimes people use a metaphor to infer sentiment, such as the side of an active volcano, which obviously gives you a visual image of some emotions. Okay, so what did we find then? Okay, so hygiene factors, or those factors that lead to dissatisfaction if we don't have them. The ones that got mentioned the most in our analysis were a lack of security and status for learning advisors in New Zealand. And these were generally as a result of deficient company policy. Company policy is Hertzberg's term. What does that mean in a university? Well, so there's policy, administration, the way in which the university is managed. So what we found is a number of authors expressed frustration and dissatisfaction at some of the changes that were being heralded by neoliberalism. And these were often accompanied by restructuring in the institution, leading to turbulence and in some cases job loss. So neoliberalism and that led to certain things that created dissatisfaction. It led to uncertainty around roles and a lack of security in times of change. The need to prove the worth of the profession and the outcomes of working with students, and that's a difficult thing to do. How do you prove that the work that you're doing is making that difference for the students? There are ways, but it's not an easy thing to do. And also, learning advising being an emerging profession, people felt an uncertain identity, and there was a sense that if there were job cuts in the institution, perhaps learning advisors would be the first to go because it wasn't considered essential to core business. So these aspects, the absence of security and status, and what they saw as good company policy or good university policy, created dissatisfaction and anxiety for a number of the authors. So here's an example of a quote that encapsulates a lot of what I've said. I'll just give you a moment to read that. Okay, so that, yeah, institutional change, restructuring, restricted funding, and so forth. Okay, now let's look at the motivators though on the positive side. So there were three main themes that were identified from an analysis of motivator factors. And these were personal growth, relationship with peers, and the work itself. So personal growth, so people talked about really enjoying training and doing research as well that was relevant to their profession and that would help them in their jobs. And some talked about writing. Some people enjoyed that process. So those sorts of personal growth. Relationship with peers was also mentioned, and this is normally a hygiene factor in Hertzberg. However, in this context, it was generally linked to personal growth, which suggests to me that maybe learning advisors are highly social creatures. I don't know. So they mentioned things like enjoying team teaching and the growth that came personally from working with other teachers and what they learned, for example. Or attending conferences and again the growth that occurred from hearing other people discussing and learning in that way. Or smaller conferences of what we often call hui, ATLAANZ hui in New Zealand. Okay. And finally, the third main thing that came through was the work itself. So that's the job that we do as learning advisors. So people enjoyed, for example, teaching together, and then the one-on-one work. And someone referred to the satisfaction of helping students and that eureka moment that you might have when you felt, yes, I've helped that person with a particular aspect of academic literacy. So I've got one quote here that you might want to have a look at that encapsulates a lot of this personal development linked to peer relating. So you have a few moments to read that. Okay, so this passage referred to really enjoying a writing retreat where they all went away together and they learned about writing. So this learning, this growth, this building confidence is in a peer context was something that really came through. Okay, so that's what we found from our analysis in the New Zealand situation that help people both, well, cause dissatisfaction and motivated people, make people satisfied, like their work. So I guess I was interested for those of you who are here, just to think about hearing from you whether those are the sorts of things that would you resonate with those sorts of things. Are they the things that make you dissatisfied as a learning advisor or motivated? And then secondly, do you feel that they play a role in student learning? So if you're feeling dissatisfied, is that going to impact negatively on student learning, and vice versa? If you're feeling motivated, is that going to impact positively on student learning? So if anybody has any comments about that, that would be really interesting to hear. And I see Layla's typing, would be great to hear from her. Just while she's typing, I'll just give you an example from my own life. Just when it was my first year of a learning advisor, I was on a contract, and it was about to end the next day, and I usually loved my job and loved seeing students, but I had a student contact me, and I was just feeling, I guess, a bit fed up, but dissatisfied, but insecure, and I think that's probably the worst interaction I had with a student because I ended up coming across as frustrated, a little bit sort of more teachy, and I just had to think about it afterwards and think what went on there. So that was just a bit of an example from me. So Layla, motivated contact with students in workshops and during appointments. Yeah, yeah. So it's those things about the work itself, the actual role of a learning advisor. Because the eureka moments too, when you're one on one with students, I mean, sometimes it can be frustrating seeing students, or I mean, one of the comments that one of the learning advisors made was that sometimes she had to fight up expectations that someone's going to just proofread her work and not actually work with them to learn their own skills and things like that. But when you have those really great moments when you're actually able to perhaps support someone to develop their skills. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, sharing frustrations, uh, that's interesting too because in Hertzberg's analysis, the peer getting on with peers doesn't see as a motivating factor, but that it has come up a lot in our study that working with that talking to peers, that getting on well with your colleagues is motivating. Maybe because you're learning through that process. Mm, yeah, sharing it. Yeah. Mm. You're reflecting afterwards and teaching that learning. Yeah. Yes. And so do people think that these processes of being motivated in these ways, does that enhance your ability to help students? Or is that just a management sort of theory? Mm. So okay, so after having a debrief, talking about frustrations, you can come back more refreshed and energized. Interesting. So that, yeah. Anybody else have a comment about whether, or being dissatisfied? Have they ever had, feeling dissatisfied with their job? Has that ever negatively impacted their work? Be honest. Yeah, okay. So yeah, it's good. It sort of gets it out, doesn't it? Even if you don't want to face it sometimes. And then we can, yeah, if you read it next time, you theoretically do we improve. See what Andrea's come up with. Eleanor. It's interesting that Kathy's talked about conferences being energizing. That's a real theme about learning in a group context. And I guess we know as learning advisors probably the best way to learn. I'm quite sure there were a few people typing that didn't come through, or oh, here we are. So we'll just hear from Andrea, and then I'll go on and talk to you about the next study we did. Pressure of high demand, so that creates dissatisfaction. Yeah. And that certainly came through in our research as well. Yeah. And in the context of budget cuts and that sort of thing. The pressure to do more with less. So thanks for that. I guess it kind of confirms what we found. And if anyone has other comments, feel free to type them. I thought I'd talk now about our second study. So this was when we found some gender differences, which were kind of interesting and made me think a bit about myself. So what we did here, it was a survey, this one, and it was bigger. It was 146 working adults, and it was international, and it was an online survey, and we asked open-ended questions. So that's probably all I need to tell you. But basically, well, it was finding out what made people love their job or what made people hate their job. So it was quite strong emotions. And initially, there were no surprises. Actually, I'm going to just go back because I don't think I need to show you the next slide necessarily because that might be, I think I can just speak to it. It's probably a little bit simpler. So we asked them a variety of questions and we've done a variety of analyses. But one of the things that came through was the finding that something that made people love their jobs was the work itself they did. So, and that has come through in the chat and in our previous research about learning advisor work. So if we were applying this to learning advisors, it would be perhaps teaching in a classroom situation, team teaching, one-on-one advising. That's, I guess, our core of what most of us do. And loving that part of it. So if you're somebody else, you're a builder, you would like, I guess, building houses, the actual activity of it. If you're a accountant, you like, as I said before, working with numbers and so forth. So what we found was, yes, this was a really strong factor in what people enjoyed about their job. It was that job itself stuff. But we dug a bit deeper because we thought, well, we can't. Part of it was we thought we can't publish that because it's exactly the same thing as Hertzberg found. But maybe there's something different here, and we had a little bit of a sense looking at the data sort of on the bit of a superficial level, because we originally used a software program to do the analysis, which came up with the broad, it was LexiMensa software, to come up with the broad findings, which fitted with Hertzberg. But some of the comments that we saw seemed to reflect perhaps something, a gender difference, but the LexiMensa software didn't seem to dig that deep. So we cut all the pieces of paper out and we did a manual thematic analysis around gender, because we seemed to be seeing a trend. And what we found was that it became clear that the sense of enjoyment people gained related to the work itself, but related either to a sense of competence at work, that was being good at the job or the activities, or a sense of challenge in their tasks. And this is big challenge, like achieving what initially seemed too difficult or near impossible. And we found that those who spoke about competence were almost all women, like 99% sort of. The majority who spoke about challenge were men. So here's a few examples. And I'd say it's always a bit awkward making these kind of gender, because it's not global, but these were trends that came through. Competence, so women, so one of the women here, she argued, I love this job because it gives me the ability to argue and use my legal knowledge and research. So she was competent, fully competent in this, and the job gave her the ability to be competent, to use her competence. Or for the second woman, the enjoyment I get from my work is because of my ability to and getting match commercial invoices and pro forma invoices, and she has to match these exactly. And I'd never had an invoice returned by the bank because it did not match the requisitions. And she's really proud of that, her competence. This proved to me that I knew my job well. And so, there was lots and lots of quotes like this about people enjoying their job because they felt competent. If we go on to the second group of people, which were the majority were men, the vast majority were men. The first person here, as a New Zealand small to medium enterprise, working with the team to win a large contract with one of the world's biggest companies, headquartered in the USA, I was up against a large and sophisticated competition, but winning the work, David and Goliath stuff, that's what made him love his job. David and Goliath stuff. Those, huge challenge and meeting that challenge. The second one there, I love my job because we get challenges that haven't been solved yet. We get asked to work on things that haven't been worked on before. So, and again, lots of these sorts of quotes from mostly the men. So, I thought that was quite interesting. We thought that was quite interesting, and we've gone on to do some analysis and writing that up. But just for the purposes of today, I just thought I'd share that with you because we haven't actually published on this yet, but we have presented at a conference, and we've sent a paper off for publication. But I just thought it might be kind of a bit fun to share and just see whether you kind of agree and whether you prefer being stretched into a challenge that you maybe not possible, or you prefer that sense of being extremely competent. And I'm sorry, those little people are over the word competent, so that should say extremely competent. And I guess what I'm maybe if we reflect in terms of our learning advisors role, sorry, it caused me to reflect because I realized that it does really, I like challenge. However, for me, so if I'm running a new program, for example, I ran a new program for mature students last year, but the pleasure I got and the enjoyment was that it went well and that I could then say, and I managed it well, and I could then say, I guess I was competent at it. Whereas if I know personally I'm more reticent to put my hand up for the big challenges. And I think sometimes that might, that's good in a way because I know what I enjoy. But at the other hand, I also wonder sometimes that might hold me back from a challenge that I maybe could otherwise move into. I was just saying, any thoughts, comments that fit with you or you agree? Yeah, I'm a bit the same. I always thought of myself as someone who liked challenge, but I think it's only a challenge which I know I can achieve. It's going to be hard, but I know I can make it. Rather than a challenge which I've never done that before, and it's I don't know. I have to have some sense that I can do it. Interesting. Being stretched and challenged, yeah, has its ups and downs, but it feels wonderful. Yeah, and I guess we've all had that experience of even if we prefer to stay in that competence zone, we've probably all done something or been put in a situation where we're really, really stretched and we're thinking, my goodness, am I going to do this? Am I mad? What choosing this, or why did they put me in this situation? But it can feel great once you've achieved it. Yeah, interesting that sense of and that's one of the ways we've been looking at I think a few years ago the imposter syndrome was bandied around as a word, that sense that often professional women have of that they're actually an imposter in their roles and that someone's going to find out that they actually can't do this. And so I don't know if that relates to that because obviously you did manage it, but mm, uncomfortable. Yeah, challenging students to help them grow. Interesting. Yes, yes. I'm just wondering also about some of the students that don't come to see us who we know could benefit. Is there a concern there that from them that they're going to be challenged or stretched beyond something that they feel they can cope with? I don't know. Just a thought. Okay, so just something to perhaps leave you with to think about. Unless anyone else got any other comments. I just thought it was quite interesting. And I think, I mean, another issue as well as learning advisors, one of the aspects that did come through a little bit in our textual analysis, where we looked at what creates dissatisfaction for learning advisors, was that it isn't a profession that there's very much room to move in terms of promotion, or well, that's the experience of the New Zealand crew anyway. So you can go into management maybe, but other than or go into another area of academic work, but within the learning advisor profession, advancement was limited. People felt So, I mean, I don't know if that's the case, then people who seek challenge either have to find a way to have that happen within the role, or they could become frustrated. So that's a thought too. Any comments about that? Fire them through. Okay, so we'll just think about moving along. The last part of the talk, I just thought it might be quite good to share strategies that there may be some managers online, and maybe you're looking for ways to help engage staff or keep them having an enjoyable time at work, or you in your own practice as individual learning advisors, you're always looking for ways to stay motivated, stimulated, enjoy your work more. And so from our research, and I'm now going back to the first piece of research, when we looked at what learning advisors in New Zealand said. These were just some things that came through, findings. So from coming out of, I guess, all of our results, that maybe just a couple of things that managers could look at. Keeping communication open. But I guess the biggest one that came through, and it seemed to certainly be reflected in the chat tonight, was providing opportunities for collaboration. So teaching collaboration, we've instituted in our team opportunities for personal sort of PD sessions in our team meetings. I think it's something you have to be quite disciplined about, because it doesn't always happen like it's planned, but they're really enjoyable. And obviously supporting staff to go to conferences and hui, those sorts of things came through. And in terms of individual learning advisors, like what we can do as individuals to help ourselves continue to enjoy our work, the sorts of things that came through were continual professional development. And again, these came through the chat as well. Opportunities to be stimulated, go to conferences, talk, and I guess to also talk to colleagues and debrief came through the chat. Team teaching was something that came through our research. People enjoyed team teaching, and they enjoyed making resources together and that sort of thing. So those were some things that came through our research, and I just thought, yeah, it's maybe an opportunity for, is there anything else that helps, that you might want to suggest to other managers or individuals that might help enhance workplace enjoyment? And I've just put email these because I didn't know if we'd run out of time, but we've got plenty of time to share them if people have something they'd like to share. Tips for having fun at work. Oh, okay, that's a great one. So as a manager, providing your staff with PD days. sorry, reading days to catch up on the latest research and inform yourself. Yeah, provide social activities that aren't necessarily work related is important. Yeah, I really agree. I really agree with that. Yeah, we last year we were going through a restructure and we didn't have that. It was just yeah. It was it, it's great to feel part of something, um, part of a group of people on a friendly basis. Okay, writing and publishing stretches you, yes. And I think one thing, yeah, I found is trying to keep those things up that you do enjoy because I really like writing as well. And if I'm not so keen on my job, is at that time making sure I get some writing in does enhance my enjoyment. Okay, so like informal get-togethers just to discuss an issue, and I guess there's that collegiality and that friendliness is part of it. Oh, well, thank you. It's really interesting to hear because what's coming through, and which is one of the things that came through very strongly, as I've said, in our research, was this what does Hertzberg call it? Co-worker relations and the importance of co-worker relations actually for motivation um, in the context of learning advisor work. And he actually would classify that as a hygiene factor, but actually it seems really important for us as learning advisors to have good co-worker relations in the sense of using those to build friendliness, but also develop and grow and discuss and debrief and learn together about how to be better learning advisors. So on that note, I guess I can return to um, my the assumption or the I made at the beginning or the rationale for this talk was that I had a sense that if learning advisors enjoy their work more, they're going to be doing a better job at supporting students. And I think that the discussion we've had, our research findings and the discussion I've had with you today suggest that to be the case, and that part of enjoying work for learning advisors is that co-worker, um, working with co-workers in terms of their professional development, which will then enhance student learning because people will know we're better informed and refreshed what they do.